Well, welcome back to CBS News Mornings. The time now is 7:30. Let's get you caught up on some of the news you may have missed. The Biden administration is cracking down on so-called ghost guns, with the president gearing up for a major announcement later on today. He's also expected to announce the nomination of Steve Dettelbach to serve as the director of the ATF. The stage is set for a presidential runoff election in France. Emmanuel Macron is set to face far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. And new images have emerged of Russian troops making their way to Ukraine's Donbass region after failing to take Kyiv. Ukraine's president says more support is needed from the U.S. to help hold off Moscow. And part of that request is a demand for another round of weapons from the U.S. and Western allies as Russia pivots to an even deadlier and more destructive assault on the eastern region. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House with more on the administration's response. Ed, good morning.
Anne-Marie, good morning. Happy Monday. Great to see you. White House officials continue to defend the level of assistance they've given Ukraine, including equipment given and the hours of phone calls they've had to discuss possible options, as U.S. officials and European allies warn this war is nowhere near over. As Russia regroups and possibly prepares for an even bloodier assault on Ukraine, President Zelensky tells 60 Minutes his country's survival depends on American help.
Unfortunately, I don't have the confidence that we will be receiving everything we need.
The U.S. has sent defensive missiles like Javelins and Stingers, insisting it's providing Ukraine with what it needs to keep fighting.
I spent 2 hours on the phone with the Ukrainian Armed Forces commander and President Zelensky's top advisor, and we went through every single one of their requests.
But the Biden administration's been reluctant to send offensive weapons like planes and tanks for fear of provoking Russia even further. Instead, it's telling European allies to send what they have, and the U.S. will try to replace the weaponry. There's also bipartisan pressure for the White House to do even more.
I think they're getting better, but they still don't understand the goal. The goal is for Ukraine to win.
And despite severe sanctions already, some in Congress say nothing will change until European countries cut off Russia's energy sector.
Every single day that they are continuing to import Russian oil and gas, they're funding Putin's genocide in Ukraine.
India is also a big customer of Russian oil, and that's expected to be a big topic of a virtual conversation later this morning between President Biden and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India is also one of those countries that buys much of its military equipment from Russia, and they've been less punitive than most on the Putin regime, which is also, Anne-Marie, likely to be a subject of the conversation.
Yeah, Ed, India's finding itself sort of under pressure in a variety of areas. We just had a recent sanctions against some diamond mines in Russia. They are major contributors to the diamond industry in India as well. So that being said, including this air defense system that they're buying, has the administration signaled at all how it feels about India's lack of action or response to Russian aggression?
President Biden himself, at least publicly, has been less vocal with the concerns, understanding that as a nuclear power is one that also has to deal with the situation with Pakistan and the fact that for so long it had been buying its military equipment from Russia, that the situation's a little different or that it might take India a little longer to get there. But just in the last few days, they sent a senior national security official of Indian descent to India to meet with government officials there to try to make the case that they've got to join in the sanctioning of Russia. And we'll see after today's conversations, not only between the president and Prime Minister Modi, but also between the Secretary of State and his counterparts, whether India gets any closer to at least sympathizing with understanding what most of the Western world, most democracies in the world are up to. Remember, India is the largest democracy in the world. They are a nuclear power, so symbolically, certainly, getting them to come on board and join with other countries that are sanctioning the Putin regime, speaking out against the violence, would be a huge step towards making Russia understand how big a deal this is.
In the meantime, we're learning about a bit of a shakeup at the top in regards to commanders and Russian commanders. There's a brand new Russian commander taking over the Ukraine war. Any response from the White House at all on this news?
I mean, not officially, because they continue to say, look, what Russia's doing is a war crime, is unjustified, is violent, and they don't really care who's in charge because this thing is still happening regardless. He is known to American officials because of his involvement in the conflict in Syria. They're obviously concerned that this means things could get better organized, at least in the eastern part of the country. And remember, you've heard experts in recent days, European allies, Ukrainian officials, Americans all say that if Russia's going to reposition and focus on trying to take over the eastern part of that country, a far more wide open rural area where more conventional military equipment like tanks can be used to literally roll in through communities and make it harder for the guerrilla style use of or tactics of Ukrainian forces to stop them, that could mean Russia makes some big gains in the coming weeks as that offensive begins. So whether that has to do with the new general or not, it's just another reminder that this is not a conflict that's expected to wrap up anytime soon.
So quickly, before I let you go, a domestic issue, these ghost guns. You know, the administration has tried to make some headway when it comes to gun control. Not an easy thing to do from the president's office, right? You need Congress's support. So we are going to hear some announcements, though, on cracking down on ghost guns. These are these guns that they don't have serial numbers, so they're untraceable.
Right. So among other things, what they're announcing today is the Justice Department is going to require that commercial companies that make ghost guns put a serial number on them. White House argues that this is constitutional. It can be done through executive authorities by the president and the Justice Department, but that just like conventional firearms, they're now going to require a serial number. The other thing the president's doing to continue his, at least the political push here on gun control, is he's nominating somebody else to run the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. His name is Steve Dettelbach. He's a former U.S. attorney from the Northern District of Ohio, so the Cleveland area. He ran unsuccessfully for Attorney General in Ohio a few years back and pushed for a ban on assault weapons and universal background checks, things that the president and this administration and many Democrats on Capitol Hill support. But of course, as you said, through all these years, nothing significant has been done in the legislative way regarding gun control, which is why today the president's making this announcement. And you may remember, we talked about this almost exactly a year ago. He told the Justice Department to go figure out what can we do through executive authority alone, and this is what they're coming back with. Go after the manufacture and the commercial sale of ghost guns. But remember, you're going to hear from police chiefs today and other law enforcement experts to say, great that you're doing that, but given that it's so easy to make these 3D printable guns, there's instructions on how to do so online. Okay, if you're going to make it so that commercial ones have to have them, that means a lot of people probably who want these kinds of weapons are going to go out and figure out how to make it on their own or do some kind of informal sale. And that's always been the trickiest part of gun distribution and gun violence, is tracking the informal sector that sells and distributes these weapons.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. You can literally print these things up using plastic, and they are just as deadly as a gun that you would buy in a store. Ed, thank you very much.
Take care.